and welcome back to the Intelligent Conversations podcast. Today, I have the honor to speak with Tim Heale. Tim is the host of the Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories podcast. Having spent most of his adult life in the military, he has since retired and he now interviews people about their extraordinary lives. So, Tim, thank you for coming on. I looked forward to this podcast. I feel like we have pretty similar styles, but I want to ask you this. I want to kind of take it way back. Why did you join the military? I think that's something that a lot of kids, especially my age, they're kind of asking, like, what am I going to do with my life? What was kind of your motivation to joining the military? I think that's an interesting path that not too many people take.
Not wanting to go to jail, basically.
That's a simple answer. There we go.
I mean, the reason that I went into the military rather than into farming, I can take you back a little bit further. At the age of about 10 and a half, we used to have something in England called the 11 plus. And you used to take the 11 plus to see whether you're bright enough to go to a grammar school. So I took the 11 plus and failed it pretty miserably, to be honest, which meant that there's no way I could go to a grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
Following on from that, I grew up at my granddad's farm a lot of the time when I was a kid, and I thought I'll be a farmer. And at that time there was a school called Haddam Hall, which was an agricultural boarding school, and you had to go and take a test to see whether you're bright enough to go to that college. So at the age of sort of 10 and a half, I went to this college and took an entrance exam and failed that pretty miserably. so that kind of ended my farming career. So I then thought, well, I'll go join the army. I love war films and stuff like that, so I'll join the army. And then at the age of about 14 and 3/4 was the first time that you could go and take a test to go and join the British Army. So I went over to a place called St Albans where the recruiting office was to take the test to join the army. Failed that pretty miserably as well. And this recruiting sergeant, he says to me, "Son, if you can't pass a simple test like reading and writing, you've got no chance of joining the army." Well, that was a bit of a blow, actually. I took a long, hard look at myself over that weekend, and come Monday morning, I decided that was it. I'm going to knuckle down at school. I'm going to learn how to properly read and write and go to all the classes. Because I spent the last 3 years up in the wag, skipping off school, going and get a tick in the morning of registration and then Scarpa. Anyway, this particular Monday or this week, I went to every single class. Half of the teachers thought I was a new pupil because they'd never seen me.
Mm-hmm.
And for the next 6-7 months, I'd really knuckled down. I found it really tough because at the time I didn't know, but since found out that I suffer from dyslexia.
I mean, that story's amazing. So it was like, when you were younger, right, they pretty much told you, hey, you're going to be a failure. So how do you kind of like deal with that? Like growing up your whole life, just kind of failing over and over and over and like still trying, right? Because I think some people, right, they kind of just, after the first blow, they're just kind of like, yeah, I'm done type of thing. They just can't handle it and they just never, but you just kept going. Like, how did you do that, dude? Like, that's inspiring. Like, how did you do that?
Well, I think it helps to be a bit of a rubber ball to start with, and it also helps to have your glass half full. I'm one of those people that's always had a half glass full. Not a lot gets me down. Occasionally I get a bit down in the dumps, but it ain't long before I bounce back. But anyway, so what happens about 7 months later, got another chance to go back and retake the test to join the army. I mean, I was hanging out for some really rough types anyway, but there was a mate of mine that was all right. We went to the recruiting office together, and the recruiting sergeant remembered me from the time before, and he said, "Right, lads, there's the papers. Get on and do that, I'll be back in a little while to see how you get on. Anyway, my mate's given me half of the answers. And the upshot of it was I managed to get a place in the British Army as a junior soldier at the age of 16. And on the 5th of August 1974, I jumped on a rattler on a train and went off to the depot of the Queen's Division at Bassingbourne Barracks in Royston in Hertfordshire as a junior soldier in the Royal Anglian Regiment, and kind of never looked back.
That's so cool. Like, can I ask you this, just kind of get an idea? Were you ever like deployed, like, and actually like see combat? Like, was that something that you actually like saw?
Oh yeah, I mean, first time I was in a proper type of conflict was in 1977. I'd just turned 18, and I found myself in West Belfast in a place called the Ballymurphy in Northern Ireland, being shot at, rocketed, riots every day. You know, it was a real tough tour, that 6 months. My section commander was shot on that tour, and he effectively, I always reckon that he took a bullet for me, because we used to go out in patrols of sort of 12 men and in 4-man bricks. So you've got four guys as part of a 12-man patrol. For some reason, we came down out of a place called the Moyard into Springhill Avenue in the Ballymurphy. We'd lost the other 2/3 of the patrol, so there was just the 4 of us. We've come round this corner, and my section commander, he says to us, change. Well, we hadn't done that since training. We'd been out there for a couple of months. So we swapped sides, effectively. Mm-hmm. So I was always at the front right, he was at front left. I had a guy called Terry behind me, and he had Chris behind him. So we swapped places. And about another 50 metres down this road, 2 shots came out from an M1 carbine. One of the shots went straight through his groin and out of his backside. The other one went in through somebody's kitchen and scared a cat. I fired back 2 rounds. The first round, we think, whistled right past the shooter's ear. And the second one, I took out a stained glass window of Corpus Christi Church in the Ballymurphy. On the follow-up, we managed to recover the weapon, because I guess with my rounds going past his ear, he dropped it and scarpered. But the boss had been shot, and within a couple of minutes, the street had filled up with about 2,000 people. It was a bit of a scary moment. An ambulance came, picked him up and took him off to hospital. The rest of the patrol came along. We dealt with the situation, did the follow-ups, recovered the weapon, and that was a pretty scary moment.
That's crazy. Oh my goodness. How do you kind of like just keep your cool in those moments like that? I feel like, I don't know. Is it just, I would like to think that maybe I would, let instinct take over and just kind of, but how do you just kind of keep your cool, turn around, start shooting back at that? Like, that just, to me, just blows my mind.
It's just the months and months of training that go into pre-deployment training. And it's always been the same. That's kind of what makes the British Army the best in the world, is that we train hard and end up fighting easy. I mean, every pre-deployment package I've ever been on has been tough. And they make it tough because they put you in every conceivable scenario that they think might happen. And 9 times out of 10, none of it happens. But you train hard and you fight easy. And that's the way that the British Army have always done it.
That's awesome. That reminds me of someone was talking about the I think it might have been one of the people in the British Army. He was talking about how like they kind of prepare prepare type of thing. So then, like you said, like most of the scenarios you don't even encounter. And then once you're placed in like a combat situation, then you realize, oh, this isn't as bad. And you kind of let that training take over. And it also reminds me, so I played basketball. It's pretty big here in the United States. And I just remember that we would always kind of similar mentality. It was like, hey, like we're going to practice very rigorously. So then in the game, we can just have fun, right? And enjoy the sport type of thing. And if I remember correctly, I think when I read your bio, did you play rugby? Am I getting that right?
Oh, yeah. I was well into me rugby. Most of my life, I've played it on and off for different teams where I've been.
What was kind of the draw to that?
Oh, it's just fun. It's so much fun. It really is. It's so much better than soccer. The thing with rugby is that it's for all abilities and all shapes and sizes. If you take a look at soccer, they're all skinny little whippets that tear around thinking that falling down, pretending they're injured.
Yeah.
You go onto a rugby field, I mean, you look at the size of some of the guys, I mean, particularly the second row and the forwards. I mean, they're all big lads. And then you've got a little scrum half like myself. Not only got to make sure that I know what's going on in the game and get the ball out, but I've also have to tackle some of these big guys as well. And there's no more fun than on a real horrible, muddy winter's day when it's pouring down with rain, the field's waterlogged and you're soaking wet and you're running around with a lump of pig's leather that keeps slipping out of your hands and you're rolling around in the mud taking people out. It's so much fun. I mean, what's not to like about playing rugby?
I actually remember, so one time my friend, they had like tickets to a rugby match here. And I was like, rugby? I've never watched that. And it was actually we had like a soccer stadium there. They were playing a rugby match there. And I was just watching and it was so fun, like just to watch because I didn't even know half the rules, right? I didn't know how like the scoring system worked. I figured it out towards the end, but
yeah,
I just remembered like the fan base and everything, like they were way more energetic than freaking like, and kind of to your point, like soccer players, I just don't like it that it ends in ties is one thing. I'm like, there has to be a winner, right? Like there just has to be a winner. Like this is what sports is about, but there's a tie. And it just makes me so upset when there's a tie type of thing. I'm like, there has to be a winner. Yeah, so rugby, I when I went there, I just remember like everyone was going crazy. Like shirts were getting like thrown off and they were just, let's go. I'm like, how the heck? Like I didn't even know we had like a rugby team here and they're like diehard fans and they're going nuts. I'm like, you don't see this in a basketball game like or soccer game or football game for even that matter. I'm just like, these guys are like crazy. And it was fun. It was like one of the funnest sporting events I ever went to. So
the other thing with a rugby crowd is that you can wear the opponent's shirt in amongst the opponent, or you can wear your own shirt in amongst the opponent's stand, and you're perfectly fine. You don't get violence off the pitch in rugby. You get respect, and everybody respects not only the fans but the players. I mean, you look at a rugby player getting told off by a little tiny ref, and they're calling them sir, and what the ref says goes, and you don't argue with them. It's not like soccer. So rugby is all about respect and respect for others and respect for the game, and it's got its core values. And anybody that sort of steps outside the core values are disciplined. And that's what rugby's really about. And it's such a great game to A, watch, and B, play. If you ever get a chance to play rugby, it's great fun.
thank you for sharing that. It sounds really cool. And I want to kind of ask you this. You kind of mentioned like discipline, respect. I think for one, right, respect. I mean, that you probably saw that when you served in the military. Respect is probably of the utmost importance, right? And then same with rugby, respect. Would you say when you played rugby, did that kind of like translate into the military? You just kind of, it was expected of you, like you respected kind of your commanders, or did you have like anyone like try to challenge that authority?
Well, the kind of two go hand in hand. I mean, the fundamentals of rugby is self-discipline, respect for others, respect for the game, and fairness. In the British military, we have a set of core values of courage, selfless commitment, and a whole host of really good ethics that you live and work by, and everybody follows them in the military. And again, that's what makes the British Army what it is, respected around the world for being some of the best soldiers in the world. And it comes from that level of discipline that's instilled in you from day one.
So having like your background stuff, let's say there's an average Joe out there. I feel like there's a lot of people that maybe don't have that discipline, right? They're just kind of just floating by the boat. They don't have the set routine schedule and discipline. What's kind of your process? How would you kind of help them develop discipline so then they can have a very, I think, happy life? I think if you have discipline, then it can lead to a very happy life. But what's kind of your take on that?
Well, I would encourage anybody to go into the military. Just maybe what happens in this country is when we're involved in a conflict, take Afghanistan, for instance. We were in Afghanistan for the best part of 20 years. I did 3 tours there. But during that time, we didn't have a problem with recruitment because young guys want to join the military, want to go to war, to get a boy's own adventure. I mean, don't get me wrong, war is a pretty horrible thing, and I've seen some pretty horrendous things in my time. But for a boy's own adventure, it's great, and it teaches you so much. It teaches you respect for life, for one thing. But alongside that, you've got camaraderie, you've got discipline, you've got the ability to trust people, and that's kind of lost in civilian society, and not just in the UK, but worldwide. Respect for humanity is kind of lost. For instance, whenever there is an issue in this country, when there's a problem, take the pandemic and the vaccine rollout. It was all going P-tong to start with. The first people they call in is the British military to come up with a plan to fix the problem and get the rollout of the vaccine working properly. And that doesn't happen by default. That is because the British military are the best at what we do. And whenever there's a crisis, and we've had fireman strikes in the past, first people they call in is the military to go in and man fire appliances while the firemen are on strike. So that's what the military bring. It's that level of discipline, logistical support, and it all comes down to that initial training that the British military go through, and it's a system. Day one, week one, you're shown how to look after yourself, look after your kit, and then the next few weeks, they go about bashing you down, and then they start rebuilding you. And that's where all of those core values come in. When they start rebuilding you, you become a cohesive team. You're all pulled together. And that's where it all comes from. And I think everybody should have that. And that should be taught from an early age.
I actually agree. So if I'm just kind of help me and kind of the listeners here, it's kind of like if everyone has, like, we can have different viewpoints of how we handle problems, but if we have core, like we all have the similar core values and core core values, then we can actually solve a lot of problems. We can be efficient. Like you said, the military is very efficient. It can roll out solutions rather quickly compared to other organizations that are complaining about other things, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at? If everyone has kind of shared core values, but then a lot can get done, and it's okay to kind of have those differing viewpoints. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think it should be taught from elementary school, the military ethos, taught to kids at a young age of the core values of the military, and that's instilled in them, and then that'll rub off then on future generations. I think current generations have lost that level of respect for anything. I mean, just take I don't know whether you saw, there was a big festival, Glastonbury, and Greta Thunberg turned up to. Have you heard of Greta Thunberg or Greta? What's her face? That Swedish one that kept playing playing hooky from school, that protested outside the Swedish what's name, and now she's an international influencing star going around the world preaching climate change. Well, she flies around the world gobbing off. She was at this festival and talking about how climate change is doing this and the other. When the festival finished, the amount of rubbish that these hypocrites left behind for somebody else to clear up just beggars belief. You couldn't make it up. The mess behind them was unbelievable. Rubbish. They left all their plastic water bottles, their trash all over the place. I mean, and somebody's got to clear it up. And they rather than sort of take their own rubbish and dispose of it correctly in the bins provided, no, they just throw it on the ground. And these are the people that want to save the planet. These are the people that are complaining about the plastics in the sea. Yet they've left a sea of plastic across these fields where this festival's been. Now, I was at a demonstration a while back for British military veterans. I don't know whether you've heard about it, but we've had an awful lot of vexatious claims against the British military for one of another war crimes of 30, 40, 50 years ago, the stuff that was happening in Northern Ireland. They're chasing us through the courts. So I went on a demonstration, and a big demonstration. We had a big protest outside Parliament in London. And when we left, there wasn't a spot of rubbish left behind. Not a fag end anywhere that you could find across that piece of site that we were demonstrating on. Yet the day before, you'd had these climate protesters, and the amount of rubbish that they'd left behind was unbelievable. And that's the level of respect that the general population has lost, because they haven't had it hard. They've had generations of parents that had let them get away with anything and everything.
Yeah, that's something I actually kind of want to. I've been kind of thinking about. Something I think, like, I kind of come to this belief that there's three things that are needed for any types of success or any type of successful relationship. So like you and the planet, right? You and another person, you and your spouse, you and your government, you and whoever. And that is if you have respect, right? We've mentioned that quite a bit today. And then number two, and you kind of been talking about this, accountability, right? There has to be accountability, right? When you mess up, when you do something, or you have to be like, accountability is key. And then the third part is patience, right? You got to be patient with one another, because honestly, we're all, right, imperfect. We're never going to be perfect, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But if you're patient with one another and say, hey, like, they're learning as well, then, but like, you know, still have that sense of like accountability, like, hey, like, you should maybe do this type of thing. Then also have the respect for them. Then I think, and then like, it's kind of like the three pillars, like those are your three pillars, and it's built on top of trust. And that's kind of this idea that I'm forming in my head right now. I'm still trying to get a good way to communicate that, but that's ultimately, right, it's called RAP, respect, accountability, and patience. But that's kind of my thoughts on that. I kind of want to hear, what's your take on that, respect, accountability, and patience?
Well, they're core values. I mean, respect comes in several forms. Respect for yourself, to start with. respect for others and respect for the environment that you live in. I mean, that's one key factor. Discipline, again. You need self-discipline to be able to stand up for your own actions. Be responsible for your own actions. And if you see somebody else not being respectable for their actions, tell them. Don't be afraid. Say, look, you're not respecting the environment you're living in. Behave yourself. I mean, yeah, it's so easy to turn a blind eye. But there you go. I mean, that's what should be taught in schools, is those core values of life.
I agree. So I actually like to do something here with this show and all that. And towards the end, I like to ask the quote unquote intelligent question of the day. So this just kind of came to me, and I'm going to ask this. How would you go about implementing that in school then, right? How would we teach that in school, those core values, so then we're not dealing with those issues that we've kind of been talking about today, and the lack of respect, lack of accountability, lack of patience? What would you say is your answer for that?
Teach the teachers how to teach correctly and get away from this ridiculous left-wing socialist rubbish that doesn't work. They need to teach these core values, and they need to be taught how to do it, and they need to live by it themselves. I mean, so many teachers are not teaching our kids how to think. They're teaching them, or they're instilling rubbish left-wing propaganda into these poor kids' heads, and that's where it's kind of failing. If they was to teach them correctly to start with, teach them core values, then the world would be so much better place.
I agree. I think
it has to start in the way that teachers are teaching.
Yeah, I think that's an important point you made there. I think that teachers, right, like ultimately they essentially implement how you think, the ideas, and especially how school is set up right now. It's pretty much told like, here's a problem, solution, and never actually tell you to like stop and think, right? Like critically think for yourself and say, hey, like, what do I think about this? Or how would I go about solving this problem? And most of the time, I mean, this is more geared towards the listeners right now. You're not going to have an answer, right? Like, I think we always expect, especially in this day of information, to always have the answer. And the reality is that we don't always have the answer. If anything, you should always be striving towards a better tomorrow, right? And again, with your point there, you have to be like, your foundation has to be those core values. And I agree. I think we've kind of lost those core values. And yes, I think it's okay to disagree, but I want to get this kind of your thoughts here before, we look to wrap up. But disagreement's going to happen, I believe. Maybe not, but how would you go about kind of solving disagreements, right? Like, how would we go about kind of handling disagreements?
Open, honest debate. It's as simple as that. I mean, respect other people's views and have a sensible debate about it. Listen to other people's point of views. Don't just diss them because they don't go along with your way of thinking. Listen to what they've got to say, and then have a discussion about it, and then trying to bring around to your way of thinking. And if that doesn't work, punch them on the nose.
There you go. That's the answer right there. So, I hate to wrap this up. You've been very phenomenal today. You've shared a lot of good insights. I think a lot of people actually can benefit from this. So if they want to find you, reach out to you. I know I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. You have a podcast. What's the best way they can find you, reach out to you, get a hold of you?
So I'm on all the popular podcast platforms. So you just put in a search for the Tim Heale podcast, Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. I'm also on YouTube on the same, the Tim Heale podcast, Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. And I'm out there. I've been a little bit prolific. I've got somewhere close on 200 odd episodes, something knocking around the Ethernet there. So, and there's a few nuggets of wisdom out there, and there's a few giggles along the way.
No, that's awesome. And is that podcast kind of just like other people you interview, or if I remember correctly, some of the first ones are you talking about some of your experiences and what you've encountered? Am I getting that right?
Well, when I first started doing the podcast just over 2 years ago now, we were really locked down, and that's how I got into it, by telling my story, because if I don't tell it, it'll be lost. Just like my grandparents, my great-grandparents. So I did 24 half-an-hour episodes of my life. So if there's any of your listeners out there that struggle with a bit of an insomnia, they can put one of those on, maybe put them to sleep, maybe give them some nightmares as well. And then I went on, I did a few other episodes of some more in-depth stuff that I'd done in my life. And then I started doing other people. And I've now just recorded number 124. So there's 124 people that are going to be out there. I mean, I'm into sort of back end of October at the moment with 2 a week going out. So, but I've spoken to some fascinating people that are so more intelligent and fascinating than me.
That's so cool. Yeah. For the listeners here, be sure to check that out. That sounds amazing. I know I for sure will be checking that out. But Tim, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here, share your views, share your things, and just have an open, honest discussion today. I think it's been very fun to have you on. So just thank you for taking the time to come on today. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Josh. I've enjoyed it. It's a bit different for me. It's slightly different for being a guest than it is being a host. So when I'm being the host, I use these twice as much as one of these, and I think that's the key to being a good host, and to being a good guest, you use this twice as much as you do these.
Yes, exactly.
There's another nugget of information, another key.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. So everyone, as you can tell, that is Tim Heale. As you can tell, he's a very intelligent person, has great things to say. He dropped his info there if you guys want to reach out to him, listen to his podcast. I know I will for sure. Stay tuned till next week. We have a great guest lined up for you guys. See you guys next week, and let's get after it. Hey everyone, if you liked this episode and would like to hear more, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. We release a new episode every Wednesday for you guys to listen to. Thank you guys so much for the support that you give. We could not have done this without you guys. If you would like to be a potential guest on the show, check out intelligentconvos.com and fill out the form there. Thank you guys again, and let's get after it.